I want to introduce you to our first readings. I'm doing that because this is probably one of the more important papers that you're going to be reading that helps you in really getting it, really understanding what the heck is going on in terms of trauma. I think the title is instructive because it says Loss, Trauma, and Human Resilience, which is important and certainly consistent with our class because the first knowledge block is on universality that we're talking about now. The second was on the causes, then the consequences, and then resilience. So what George Bonanno says is the key here is the subtitle, and that is, have we underestimated the human capacity to thrive after extremely aversive events? Yes, is the answer. In this class and the encyclopedia that I talked about that was published in 2012, tons of evidence to indicate that most people survive traumatic events, that most people are okay. Yes, 70% or more have experienced the trauma, but that does not mean that they haven't recovered from the trauma. Indeed, it's more likely that you will. The worst, most people consider post-traumatic stress disorder as sort of the worst outcome of a traumatic event. It's fairly unusual to find it. Now, if you join the military and fight in either Iraq or Afghanistan or both, you can be assured that you probably have, it's more likely than the general public. But nonetheless, the point Bonanno is making is like, wait a second, why do we have to pathologize everything? Why do we have to think that if you've experienced something like a car wreck or a rape or a financial setback or surviving prison, that you automatically, without a doubt, will be dysfunctional, have a mental illness? He makes 3 points. The article is divided into those 3 primary points. He has numbers of other points he makes, but those are the primary ones. The first is resilience is not recovery, because resilience is really maintaining equilibrium. So in other words, if you're resilient, it's like, yeah, you're knocked back by the traumatic event, but you have the ability to come back fairly quickly. And this is in contrast to recovery, in which you're thrown back and you sort of work your way back very, very gradually over a certain amount of time. So there's less change, in other words, with people with resilience than those who do not have, or at least a lower degree of resilience. The second point is that resilience is common, as I've emphasized before, that it is quite common and it should be expected. Not necessarily to minimize the experiences of traumatized people, but to not assume that they're going to be a mess for forever. That there are all kinds of strategies that they can use in order to get back to the way it was prior to the traumatic event. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes it's even better than it was before. Not suggesting we should have trauma in order to improve our lives, but actually the third point that he makes, pathways to resilience, essentially suggests that there's all kinds of ways to develop resilience and all kinds of unexpected ways, really. There are 2 types of resilience, really. The primary one that we are talking about in this particular chapter is trait resilience, but there's, in terms of this article, but there is also state resilience. In other words, you respond to the complexities that you face, and you solve that right then. And in contrast to those who have a trait they were born with and that they tend to bounce back more easily, all things considered. So what I want you to do is read this, take into account that the current state of trauma is really focused on the negative, and what Bonanno's trying to do is say, wait a second, let's reevaluate this. It may not be as bad as we think. And if so, we need to work toward that. One thing that he talks about toward the end, for example, is the role of humor. It's extraordinarily important. And any of you that worked with firefighters and others, military, know humor is very important to them. So check out this paper, and we're going to test you over it a little bit later, but I hope you'll enjoy it and appreciate it.